Good afternoon. Today I want to talk to you about an aspect of social work, which is helping the poor and the needy. As a change agent, that is certainly a focus of social work, supporting the needs of the less fortunate. And definitely in this age, as economic hardship has fallen upon many, and there is a need for benevolence on behalf of the less fortunate. People have often fall into circumstances that are beyond their control, such as a person being widowed, abandoned child, or a family that have fallen into poverty. And since there's always a need for to help the less fortunate, provisions have to be made somehow. Well, in the Bible, our infinitely wise Creator always made provisions for those who were less fortunate. He would place people in the right place at the right time, give them the right instruction, so that they could receive the need could be met for those that are less fortunate. And we'll take a look closer at that in just a moment. And also we'll see what some scholars have had to say about helping the needy and the poor, because it is an issue that will be often discussed. And let's take, for example, in the Bible, in the book of Ruth. Ruth is filled with acts of benevolence. It's kindness. It's a love story, actually. Boaz was a wealthy individual. He owned land, and he could possibly buy and own anything that he wanted. Whereas Ruth, on the other hand, was recently widowed, along with her mother-in-law. Their providers were gone. They needed help. They had debts that they incurred, and they needed help. So Ruth went out to make provisions to try to find a way to provide for their household. And she did so by working right alongside men, laboring in the fields. And what Boaz did for her, in his generosity, in his kindness, in favoring her faithfulness to go out and actually work and try to make something for herself, he allowed her to glean as much barley as she could. And throughout her working, she could get a meal, she could have water. He helped sustain her. And he helped not only provide for that one instance, but he gave her a means to have future provisions as well. He went so far as to pay off their debts of Ruth and Naomi, and letting them rise above their situation and their circumstance. At that time, that was the redemption law that Boaz acted upon. And one New Testament scholar, David Hawarda, says of this story in Ruth, keeping the covenant laws, that this redemption law sought to provide the poor with an economic base necessary to guarantee a livelihood and personal liberty. So not only do the less fortunate need one act of kindness on their behalf, but they need a means to come out of this and rise above the poverty level and have future provisions. And this is just what Boaz did in this time of misfortune for Ruth. And that is the will of God, the creator of mankind. Yet there are other instances in the Bible where the needy receive provisions. And let's take, for example, in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 4, verses 1 through 7, there is a widow, a mother of sons. She was in debt to her creditor. And the only means that she had to pay her debt was to provide her sons as indentured servants to the creditor. What mother would want to give up their children to labor like that? So she sought the wise counsel of Elijah. Now Elijah was powerful and could have easily erased her debt and sent her on her way. But what Elijah did in his wisdom was gave her a more permanent solution. He told the widow to go into her neighborhood, gather up, borrow any type of vessels that she could, bowls, pots, pans, that could be filled miraculously with oil. And that is just what happened. He had her position them so the oil would just flow and flow until all of the vessels were filled. Now, by her having this oil, she could sell the oil, pay off her debt, and have future provisions for her household, and have her sons there with her and not have to indenture them to the creditor. And what Elijah did for this widow was allow her to maintain her dignity. And he gave her a means to support her household in the process and in the future, so she could rise above her state that was temporary at that time. And that is what we want to do for people that we come into contact with in our caseloads. We don't want to just give them a temporary fix. We want to give them skills. We want to equip them for the future so that they can rise above that situation. And one scholar, Thomas Schaffer, who wrote in the Fordham Urban Law Journal, says that the Bible can teach us about poverty in a way the adversary ethic heroes cannot. Now that is profound. And yet, while the Bible has many examples of acts of kindness towards the needy and the poor, who are responsible for the poor? The argument remains. There are many who say that's their situation, let them deal with it. Some won't even respond. However, others feel the government should be responsible, or religious leaders. Let us look at the case of Job. It has been tested. A man that was being tested by Satan. Job was suffering tremendous and horrific losses at the hands of Satan, just to see if he would curse God. However, in the midst of his suffering, Job began to do a self-examination as to why he was suffering. And Job said that in no time did I turn down the needy. I never walked away from an opportunity to feed, clothe, shelter, whatever the need may have been. Because Job looked at that as his reverence to God. It was an honor to help the least fortunate. And that was the will of God. But not all share the viewpoint of Job. Even to this day, the argument remains the definition of the poor and needy. Who qualify for help? And should the government be responsible, or religious leaders, which may not even be as generous towards the poor, depending on the sect of the religion? Considerable confusion remains on what is considered to be generosity to the poor as it relates to governmental and religious support for those in need. I, however, as a future change agent, will be like those in the Bible in my work, that I will not only help the needy or the poor, but I will equip them to rise above their situation, learn skills, and give them opportunities to succeed in the future, showing the love of God to each person that I encounter in my work. Thank you.